What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones, and AJ. We're here for another episode of the UNC Basketball Lookahead Series, and we're going to be focusing on sophomore guard Seth Trimble in this one. Before we dive into it, though, big thank you to My Perfect Franchise for sponsoring this show. We'll talk about them a little bit later. As always, make sure you stay tuned for that one. But AJ, I'm going to read through real quickly some Seth Trimble stats from his freshman season, and then we'll dive into him a little bit more. Played in 33 games, averaged 9.7 minutes per game, 1.8 points, 0.6 assists, 0.8 rebounds, shot 45.5% from the floor and 16.7% from three. Trimble's an interesting one because he came in obviously as a freshman last year, a team that struggled, had a lot of guards kind of in front of him in the first place. But when you look at what he did do, at least minutes wise, he did play a decent amount, 33 games, almost 10 minutes per. He had some opportunities to come in last year and kind of, feel out his way as a freshman, and obviously in a North Carolina system that's tough, but playing for a team that's struggling as well, it obviously comes with its set of challenges too, especially when you got RJ Davis and Caleb Love in front of you too, who just played a ton of minutes. So when you look at Trimble's freshman season, AJ, what are your kind of thoughts on it before we do look ahead to what he could potentially do as a sophomore this year?
The minutes could be a little bit misleading because in the first 18 games, he averaged 14.2 minutes. In the last 15, he averaged 4.5.
Kind of sounds like the roster as a whole when it came to a lot of it seems like the bench rotation in some ways kind of cut down as the year went on. Yeah.
Well, it did dramatically with him. He had, I think, 4 games he played 20 plus minutes through the Louisville game on the road. He was playing a decent amount, and then it just cut big time. And I thought the curious thing too, and this was one of my criticisms of how Hubert handled things last year, is that it got to a point where when he got in the game, he wasn't on the ball. He was off the ball. And he's not a good perimeter shooter. That percentage from three, he only attempted 6 threes. He attempted 1 in the last 15 games, and he was taken off the ball essentially. So he would go in the game, and either RJ or Caleb would be on the ball. And that's a period in the season when teams started figuring out they knew what Carolina was going to run. They started doubling and tripling Armando more. And what I thought was curious, for example, the Notre Dame game on the road. I'll never forget he put Seth in the game, and Seth gets the ball on the right wing a few times, and Notre Dame's laying off. And he thinks about shooting and didn't shoot. He didn't have to be guarded. If you put him on the ball, you have to guard the ball, and you put RJ or Caleb off the ball, you got to guard them. Suddenly you have to guard at least 3 people on the floor instead of 2. I would think, and based on what I've been told, and Hubert said a little bit about this at his press conference in the summer, that Seth is more backup point guard driven. Now, defensively, he can handle the 2 role as well. But I think with a guy like him, with his blow-by ability and the fact that when he was backing up at the point, he was handing out assists a lot more than he did in the second half of the season, that if you go back and evaluate his season, Seth on the ball, much better than Seth off the ball. That had to be one of the things that was pretty obvious when the staff reevaluated the season. So he had sort of 2 seasons, an on-the-ball season through 18 games, and he wasn't entirely off the ball the last 15, but he was a lot. He only had 3 assists in the last 15 games. But he had, I think it was 18 assists in the first 18 games. So he was getting 1 a game. And he was scoring. All of his best scoring games were in that first stretch. Everything that he did well was in that first stretch. He had a 5 assist game. He had a 4 rebound game. He had 1 game in which he was 4 for 4 from the field. Believe it or not, 4 for 4 from the field, 3 for 4 from the free throw line, scored 11 points. I think it was the home win over Wake Forest in early January. And then poof, everything disappeared. In fact, his best games were the first few games in January. So league play, you had Notre Dame in there. Then you had the game at Louisville. He was playing really well, and then the playing time dropped. So I don't know exactly why, but part of it is Hubert tightening up the rotation, no doubt about it. Another thing is Seth got a lot of playing time. You know, he played 322 minutes last year. 255 were in the first 18 games. 67 were in the last 15. And he had an opportunity to evaluate his play, see where he went wrong, and maybe continue learning in practice. And sort of we talk film room a lot in football. We don't do it much in basketball, but a lot of film room stuff. And he watched the game and learned, watched up close and learned. So I will go half glass full with how that was approached, because I know that he's had a really good offseason. The perimeter shot was a huge thing that he's worked on, but also he had to work a little bit more on his handle and some other things. So 322 minutes as a freshman is 322 minutes as a freshman, even if it was very inconsistent how the minutes were doled out. I think he showed enough flashes that he can really help this team moving forward, and not just defensively. I think that there could be an offensive spark that his game reflects at some point, perhaps even this season. So I think he's one of the more interesting guys in the team, because he's a forgotten guy right now.
He kind of is.
He was talked about a lot this time a year ago, and now he's kind of forgotten because of the other guys that came in. So I think he's intriguing. I look forward to seeing him here in a couple of weeks when we get to go to practice.
Yeah, no, me too, because I think he has some unique skill sets we'll talk about when we do look ahead in a second, that I think kind of could help any team out, really. And looking at his last season, just real quickly, his most prolific game, at least stats wise, came in that win over Wake Forest on January 4th in Chapel Hill. 4 for 4 from the floor to play 22 minutes, 11 points in that one as well. So that was kind of a glimpse of what he can do. And then, like you mentioned, besides that, playing time really kind of dwindled after the Wake Forest game. You know, those two games in particular that week of the January 4th through the 7th, they played Notre Dame and won at home after that. Played 22 minutes, 23 minutes, 16 minutes at UVA, and then 11 minutes in the win at Louisville. And after that, AJ, it only had a double-digit game minutes-wise in one of the last, 10 plus. So playing time really went down after that one, which I think kind of is a microcosm of the season really as a whole last year. I'm sure if you look at other guys that were kind of on the periphery too, haven't had a chance to dive into it, you'll probably
if you look at the game too,
yeah.
And you and I talked about this a lot late last year, but the guys that played a lot more early and less late, the way they played late changed too. I think they were more hesitant. Tyler Nickel played with tremendous confidence early last year. He would drive and stuff like that. Yeah. Trimble was doing the same thing. Yeah, he turned the ball over some. Okay, but that's going to happen. You got to do that to learn, right? But then when those guys got in the game later in the year, when their minutes declined a lot, they were much more hesitant out on the floor. They were
quick to pass the ball. Yeah, like, hey,
they play Trimble would play hot potato with the ball. Well, I'm not supposed to have it. I
remember Nickel doing that too. It wasn't like he wasn't looking for his own shot or to create his own shot anymore. It was like, hey, like, I got the ball for a second, I'll take a dribble and then I'm gonna give it back to RJ Davis or Caleb Love or something like that. Yeah,
and then they would do something predictable, which is why the Tar Heels were not an efficient basketball team the second half of the season last year. Now, this is not a podcast referendum on the way Hubert handled those things last year, but it is part of the discussion because that was Trimble's experience.
Agreed.
And my understanding is that some of these things were recognized and that it might be different this year. It should be different because there's a lot better bench moving forward. So if you look ahead with Trimble, which I know you want to do here in just a minute, I do think that he did enough last year to benefit tremendously. And let's also remember, he was a young guy. He was a young freshman. I think when he arrived, I think he was still 17. So it's a young guy. And I saw him 2 months ago after Hubert's presser. I saw him out in the hallway there, and he looked a little older. He's changed his hair. He looked a little bit older, looked a little bit thicker. And that's one of the things we're told, that a lot of the guys have gotten stronger, like Jalen Washington's gotten stronger. And Trimble has as well, to make him a better defender, because sometimes he did get pushed and backed in last year. So a little bit stronger. Maybe he won't get backed in as much. We'll see what the skills are like. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I look forward to, when we go to practice here in a couple of weeks, I look forward to seeing the release on a shot, because sometimes it wasn't the prettiest thing.
No, it wasn't.
So what was tweaked? What if there's confidence, it's going to be a little bit more of a follow through, that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to stuff like I'm a geek about stuff like that,
No, it's interesting.
So I'm looking forward to geeking out on watching Seth Trimble.
Yeah, open practice and media day is always a fun one. I'm looking forward to that one as well. Before we look ahead, AJ, I want to give a shout out, like I mentioned earlier, to our sponsor on this one. That's myperfectfranchise.net. Been with us for a very long time. And guys, I'm just going to sum it up for you in a nutshell. If you've ever thought about opening your own franchise, myperfectfranchise.net, as you can probably tell by the name, is the place to do it and the place to do it through. And Andy Ludicky is a long-time Rivals member, diehard college football fan, franchise veteran, most importantly as well. And essentially what he does is he walks you through the whole kind of consultation process. He walks you through the entire process of opening a franchise. And what AJ's talked about a lot is one of the things that he's got big in is what is it? Porta-Johns and dumpsters, I think is two of the biggest franchises.
Porta-Johns and dumpsters. Yeah.
You talk about something you don't think of yet. You see every single place you go.
Imagine looking at a dumpster and seeing dollar signs.
I know.
He does.
But you think about it, right? You see dumpsters and Porta-Johns everywhere. I mean, we got a lot of people who
Someone's got to own them.
Someone's got to own them. Someone's got to dish them out. Someone's got to maintain those, and you make a killing off those. You know, a lot of Carolina fans go to football games or basketball games, and in the bowls lot, there's 50, Porta-Johns lined up for people when they're tailgating and all that stuff. So those are small franchises or examples of franchises you don't even think of. And then there's obviously restaurants. There's obviously car services. There's so many more that we can name, food chains, all that kind of jazz. And you can get into all these kind of things by working with Andy. So if you ever thought about opening one, just think about how many times you drive around and how many franchises you see. You see so many every single day. It's just something we don't think of. You never think about owning one, or how do I get involved in one of those? How do I potentially become an investor, become an owner of one of these? Andy is there to help you do that, and he'll walk you through every step. And my favorite part about it, AJ, which I always harp on, he doesn't make a single penny unless you do. And I think that I don't think that part really registers with people. I genuinely don't. I think people, when they hear My Perfect Franchise and they hear us talk about it, are like, okay, yeah, he'll let me start a franchise, but I probably got to pay him, $5,000 to even do it in the first place. No, when you make money, he'll make some money off of that, of course, because he's helping you along. But if you don't make money, he doesn't make money either. So again,
if you're curious, just call him. Set up a time to talk to him, and he'll talk to you. He'll explain. He'll do a much better job explaining than we will, because he understands.
Of course. And we've sat on him with a call before, and he's explained it to us. And it's a process, and it's something that takes time, and it takes effort and everything like that. But the reward at the end of the day is fantastic. And having someone there to walk you through it the whole time, I think it just makes that transition and the decision to potentially do it so much of an easier one. So guys, if you're looking to diversify, maybe leave the corporate rat race, start your own job, or just be your own boss, and you want to do your own thing, Andy can help you do that. MyPerfectFranchise.net is there for you. So find your perfect franchise there. Links in the description below to head on over there. Massive Mac Brown fan, big Texas football guy as well. So if you end up talking to him, make sure you let him know THI sent you, and maybe you'll end up talking Mac Brown for an hour before you even talk about franchises.
He'll do a little Carolina hoops too.
Yeah, he'll do a little we did talk a little Carolina hoops when we talked to him, and yeah, just a all-around good guy, really is. And if you've talked to him, or if you do end up talking to him, you'll know exactly what we're talking about within the first few minutes of chatting with him. So thank you to Andy. Thank you to myperfectfranchise.net. Links in the description below. Again, make sure you tell him THI sent you on over. All right, AJ, let's talk a little Seth Trimble and look ahead to what he could potentially do this coming season. And it's an interesting one, in my opinion, because you mentioned it earlier, all the conversations, it's about Elliott Cadeau. He's the new kid on the block. He's the new shiny toy, as we like to call it, that's coming into Chapel Hill. He's the savior of the program, I think, in a lot of Carolina fans' eyes. When you look at what happened last year, I'm being over dramatic, but I do think some people kind of look at it like that. And then you've got RJ Davis as well, who's we've already done kind of a look ahead show on him. Go check that one out. But expecting him to kind of move off the ball, and Elliott Cadeau, to be that starting point guard for the Tar Heels. That's what we expect to happen. But when you're talking about Trimble, you expect him, I would assume, to kind of be that potentially a guy in that point guard rotation. I think he's better on the ball than he is off the ball. I know the development this year has been focused on developing some more of that off the ball game and his shooting ability, because he's brothers with JP Tokoto. And I remember watching him last year, and I kind of, the way he shot, not the most beautiful shot in the world, his offensive game needed a lot of work, which kind of reminded me of JP Tokoto in his early time at Carolina. But the athletic ability, the ability to jump out the gym, the ability to make plays on defense, very similar to what we saw with JP Tokoto as well. So I do think there are some similarities there, but I also think that Trimble has a chance to really develop his game offensively and offer some really good things to the Tar Heels. So when you look at this current roster and kind of who's in front of him, essentially, where do you think he fits into this Carolina team this upcoming season?
I think he's going to be a juice injection guy. I think he's a guy that when you insert him in the game, one of his jobs is going to be to bring energy.
And he can do that.
I think
he can definitely do
you
that.
have to be a selfless player to do that. You have to recognize that a lot of the things that you add to the equation may not have a statistical mark next to them. And I think that that's a lot of what Seth can give this team, because his game is going to continue growing and he's going to have a chance to be the guy at some point, assuming he sticks it out. So I think number one, juice injection, and juice injection usually finds itself on the defensive end first, and then can get into transition, because transition off of defense. And then, if he can help him some on offense and maybe be a little consistent on offense, I think that he'll have a decent amount of playing time. If you look at the first piece we did in the Seth Trimble part of our series, at the bottom I have projection, reason for optimism, and then a projection. And I think that he's going to be someone that maybe one game may only play like 8 minutes, 7 minutes. But then depending on what the matchups are, foul stuff, whatever the case may be, there might be games he plays 17, 18, 20, 22 minutes like he did at times last year early in the season, because of what he brings to the table, what their needs are. If there are some games where they need to come from behind, like at Virginia Tech last year when he was on the floor a lot and played a very important role of them cutting an 18-point deficit down to 6, then I think you'll see him in a lot of those situations. If Hubert wants to flash, do a little shock and on, flash a press or the run and jump or whatever it is that Carolina might do that they used to do, I think someone like him can be used in those situations. So I think you're going to see him play in every game. He's going to be in the rotation. Some nights he plays more than others. And offensively, it's kind of hard right now to say what he'll provide them. I'd like to think that he can, if he's off the ball, he can be a guy that can play baseline. He got lost in the baseline. We talk about Jalen Withers being a baseline guy. You could see him because he's 6'9". He's going to have a bandana. He's got 5 different colors to his hair, that kind of thing. Trimble could be a little bit more stealth in the baseline. I think he can have some success there if he plays off the ball. I think he's someone that can have some success driving. Does he connect the drive with the kick out better than he did at times last year? Sometimes he'd lose the ball. Is he a guy that if someone else drives and they kick to him, can he knock down enough shots that you force the defense to rotate? If he could do enough of that, then he'll be a big asset on the offensive end as well. So you don't put him in there to play 4 and 5 on offense. You want to play 5 on 5 on offense, as well as obviously on defense. So it's going to be interesting to see what he could deliver in that end, but he's going to be a guy who gets into games and will help them win games. And every once in a while might be called on to do a lot more than in other games, because for the reasons that I stated. I'm looking forward to it. You know how I am. I love going into seasons because there's 1,000 guys in football I want to see, and there's a dozen guys in basketball I want to see. But he and Jalen, kind of the forgotten dudes, because college basketball is a sport of shiny new objects now.
Oh, is it?
Because teams are changing over rosters so much now, and Carolina brought in some shiny objects, but they still have 2 shiny objects that are still there that haven't really done a whole lot yet, that have their whole careers in front of them. And that to me is why the first 2 got, well, I'm going to look at Cadeau. I admit that. Of course. I'll look at Armando's hair. RJ's RJ. He's going to carry himself a little bit more like the OG that he now is.
Been there for a while.
But I really want to watch Jalen Washington and Seth Trimble, because I think that if those guys have improved tremendously, they really thicken this rotation and what Hubert can do. Hubert will have a lot of options at his disposal. And then we get to learn a lot about him. Is he a guy who really wants to play a bench, but didn't because he didn't have a bench? Or is he a guy that's just rock solid, iron 5, iron 6?
Don't rotate.
All those questions will be answered by sometime in February, maybe January.
And that's the fascinating part about the basketball season coming up. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that defensive injection is where he can really make his mark early on. I think that's where he can kind of buy some more of that playing time. And then the offensive stuff is almost a plus, because, you want Trimble to improve offensively. You should and probably will improve offensively, but you've got other guys out there that can give you points on any given night, with a lot of guys they brought in, and the returners, obviously, with RJ and Armando as well. So I do think Trimble's chance to kind of get in that rotation and really make a mark for himself and carve out a good amount of playing time, like you said, think he could really come through that defensive part, because Hubert said it before. He thinks he can be a really top defender. I know Hubert does make comments sometime that, maybe don't come true, or a little bit, too out there with some of the things he says. Not a criticism, and you're going to back your players at all times, but Trimble has the ability, from what we've seen, and we even knew it before he got here, to be a really elite defender. And a lot of that comes with that athleticism too, because it's fantastic.
One thing Hubert said, I think we'll see come true, is he wants to run more. And he totally understands, obviously, that you get into transition by playing good defense.
Exactly.
Because you force misses. And I think you can see I don't know how many easy run out baskets he got last year. They didn't score. They didn't get many.
Not score.
I was charting their transition baskets a lot last year, and it was amazing how few that they got. And there were times in transition where he would signal and run a set play.
Yeah, and you're like, why didn't you go?
I can see a guy like Trimble increasing his offensive production just through transition. I mean, if Armando or Withers, they get a rebound, they turn, they kick out, the outlet pass to a guard, and Trimble's on the court, he's got to fill a lane and get to the basket. You have an opportunity to convert a lot there. I think we're going to see more transition. And certainly with a guy like him on the floor, because of harassing on defense and just being a disruptor out there, means that they should force more misses and turnovers, and he can get some easy baskets. So I expect to see him get a lot more transition baskets than he did last year, which really isn't saying a lot when you think about it, but I think it'll be a decent number. Yeah. I'm going to go on record saying that right now.
Completely agree. I think he's the perfect transition player. Really good defensively, really fast, and really athletic. To me, sounds like the perfect guy you want out running in transition if you're a Carolina basketball guy. So we'll see if it comes to fruition this coming season, AJ, but I think it's a good time to go on and head on out of here. The Seth Trimble edition of our UNC Basketball Lookahead Series, putting out more. We have more still to come. We've also put out a few episodes already as well. So make sure you go check those out when you get a chance. Do have a playlist on our YouTube channel, or you can just search UNC Basketball Lookahead Series, and I'm sure you'll find all the videos there as well. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Appreciate y'all watching as always. Big thank you to Underdog Fantasy, myprivatefranchise.net. Getting my sponsors mixed up on this edge.
Well, thank you to Underdog too. They're sponsoring all of our daily drops.
Exactly. Right now, Underdog's been showing us so much love. They're the top of mind right now. But again, My Perfect Franchise has been with us forever, so I got a lot of love for them too.
Go do your thing at Underdog, and then call Andy Ludicky and tell him what you did on Underdog.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, that's a great comment.
Maybe he does Underdog Fantasy too.
Yeah, telling you, man. Maybe you win a little money on that Underdog Fantasy app, and you put it towards maybe opening your own franchise and stuff like that. Who knows, man? Maybe that's a good way to go about it. Whatever floats your boat, however you want to go about it. Definitely talk to Andy, though. If it's something you've considered for a long time, or you just want to do your own thing, he's the guy that can help you get there. Appreciate y'all watching as always. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. See you on the next one. Thanks.